Hello and welcome back to Shakesyear. We are working on The Two Gentlemen of Verona, and we get to hear from Protheus again today, but now we're in Act 2, Scene 6, and his monologue today is the entirety of Act 2, Scene 6. So we'll get there in a second, because yesterday we left off with him in Act 2, Scene 4, where Protheus, remember, is led by his heart. He was in love with Julia, but then he was told that he had to go to Milan and meet up with his friend Valentine because his dad and his uncle were concerned that he was not going to be like worldly enough. So he has since come to Milan, and his parting with Julia was maybe a little bit weird. He was like reciting poetry and then she just left, like without even really saying goodbye, but anyway, whatever. So he has now arrived in Milan, and he met up with Valentine. Valentine is so excited that he's there because Valentine, being the one more interested in scholarly pursuits, even though maybe he's not the sharpest knife in the drawer, was very excited to see Protheus, and he has now fallen in love with Sylvia. So he introduced Sylvia to Protheus and shared that he's planning to marry her, even though she's supposed to marry this guy named Thurio. Sylvia and Valentine want to get married, so Valentine is going to go and like sneak her out of her room with a rope ladder, and they're going to run off and get married. And he wants Protheus' help with this, and Protheus is like, yeah, I'll be right with you. There's something I have to take care of first. And so yesterday's monologue, he was like, actually, I'm in love with Sylvia, and is it because she's so awesome, or is it because what? So now we've got like the love triangle going on. Act 2, Scene 5 is just a cute little, I feel like it's a sort of a palate cleanser scene, or just because we need to see a little bit of a passage of time. We've got Launce and we've got Speed, one of whom is Proteus' servant, one of whom is Valentine's servant. And Launce, remember, was all upset that his dog didn't cry when he left, so he's definitely one of the clowns of the show. But Speed runs into Launce and is like, hey, how's your master doing? And is he still going to marry Julia? And there's this whole weird thing because Launce talks strangely, so for a brief moment, Speed is afraid that Julia and Proteus have broken up. But then Speed is like, well, ask my dog if it's going to happen. And if his tail wags, it is. And if his tail doesn't wag, it is. And if he just stares at the floor, it is. So Speed's like, okay, they're all right. Okay, cool. And the scene ends with the two of them like leaving to go get a beer. That's Act 2, Scene 5. Act 2, Scene 6, we have Protheus by himself in the house in Milan. And he says, to leave my Julia, shall I be forsworn? To love fair Sylvia, shall I be forsworn? To wrong my friend, I shall be much forsworn. And even that power which gave me my first oath provokes me to this threefold perjury. Love bade me swear, and love bids me forswear. O sweet suggesting love, if thou hast sinned, teach me, thy tempted subject, to excuse it. At first I did adore a twinkling star, but now I worship a celestial sun. Unheedful vows may heedfully be broken, and he wants wit that wants resolved will to learn his wit to exchange the bad for better. Fie, unreverent tongue to call it bad, whose sovereignty so oft thou hast preferred, with 20,000 soul-confirming oaths. I cannot leave to love, and yet I do. But there I leave to love where I should love. Julia I lose, and Valentine I lose. If I keep them, I needs must lose myself. If I lose them, thus find I by their loss, for Valentine myself, for Julia, Sylvia. I to myself am dearer than a friend, for love is still most precious in itself, and Sylvia, witness heaven that made her fair, shows Julia but a swarthy Ethiop. I will forget that Julia is alive, remembering that my love to her is dead, and Valentine I'll hold an enemy, aiming at Sylvia as a sweeter friend. I cannot now prove constant to myself without some treachery used to Valentine. This night he meaneth with a corded ladder to climb celestial Sylvia's chamber window, myself in counsel his competitor. Now presently I'll give her father notice of their disguising and pretended flight, who, all enraged, will banish Valentine. For Thurio he intends shall wed his daughter, but Valentine being gone, I'll quickly cross, by some sly trick, blunt Thurio's dull proceeding. Love, lend me wings to make my purpose swift, as thou hast lent me wit to plot this drift. And that's the end of the scene and the end of the monologue. So what he's getting at the beginning of it, he's talking about how he feels some guilt for falling in love with Sylvia, because that betrays this love that he had promised to Julia, but it also betrays his friendship with Valentine. But then he's also like, you know, if I'm not true to myself and don't allow myself to love Julia, or if I don't allow myself to love Sylvia, I'm not being true to myself, and I'm the primary one that I can depend on. Whereas, like, keeping the love of Julia and the friendship of Valentine is worth less to me if I have to not be myself, if I have to not be true to myself in order to do that, if that makes sense. So he decides that he has to be true to himself and pursue Sylvia. And the way to do that is to screw over Valentine. And then he remembers that Valentine was going to climb up this ladder to get into her window and take her away to get married. He's like, you know what? I'm going to tell her dad about that. He's going to banish Valentine, and then I can get in there. Like, she doesn't even like Thurio to begin with, so I can definitely get in there and win her before Thurio does, before that becomes an issue. So this is his plot. He's going to rat out Valentine and try to win Sylvia and step in place of Thurio. So yeah, we've got, this is an active love triangle going on here with some serious plotting, and yeah, there's still plenty of play left to go while we sort the whole thing out. So come on back tomorrow for more, and we'll find out what happens. Mwah.